One October evening, I looked out the window at the cornfield near my uncle's farm, and I knew right away that something was wrong. There were 3 scarecrows standing at the edge of the field. My uncle had put them up that day to scare away crows. The usual scarecrows: old clothes, straw, and wooden sticks. I stared at them for a few seconds, trying to figure out what had alarmed me. Then it dawned on me. One of the scarecrows had changed the position of its arm. I remembered very well how it had looked before. The arm had hung down and slightly to the side, like all scarecrows, but now it was stretched out forward, as if pointing straight at the house. I called my brother. He went to the window and looked out at the field. We stood there in silence. Then he said quietly, "It fell." We watched for about 5 minutes. Nothing else moved. The 3 dark figures just stood there at the edge of the corn. We went to bed, although, to be honest, neither of us slept well in the morning. My uncle went out to check the field. A few minutes later, he returned to the house with a face I had never seen on his face before. All 3 of the play's scarecrows were gone. They hadn't fallen. They hadn't been broken. They had simply disappeared. The wooden poles they were standing on were still there, but the scarecrows themselves were gone. My uncle walked around the entire field. Nothing by dinner time. We had almost forgotten about it. We decided that someone from the neighboring farms was just playing a joke. But the next night, around 1 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. My uncle opened it, and there were all 3 scarecrows standing on the doorstep. They weren't lying down. They hadn't been abandoned. They were leaning against the door frame, as if someone had carefully placed them there. The entire fabric was covered in red. At first, the uncle thought it was paint, but when he looked closer, it became clear that they were rowan berries, rubbed on old clothes. Someone had taken 3 stuffed animals from a field, moved them somewhere at night, smeared them with berries, and brought them right back to the door of the house. The police said they were probably teenagers from neighboring farms. A Halloween prank, maybe, but the uncle said that in the morning, when the stuffed animals disappeared from the field, he noticed one strange thing. There were no tracks on the ground between the field and the house. No human tracks, no wheels. Nothing, just 3 wooden sticks sticking out of the ground at the edge of the corn. After that, the uncle never put up a scarecrow again, and even many years later, when someone remembers that story, he sometimes says the same phrase, "I'm glad we didn't leave them in the field for another night." October is a strange month. It's the only time of year when parents dress their kids up in monster costumes and take them out into the dark to ask strangers for candy, and everyone around them thinks it's perfectly normal. I was 7 years old then. Our town had a big fall fair every year. There were carousels, pumpkins, music from loudspeakers, and the smell of roasted corn, cinnamon, and smoke drifting through the cool evening air. I still remember that smell. Back then it meant warmth, lights, and excitement. Now it never feels just cozy to me anymore. That evening my dad took my sister and me to the fair. She was 10. We walked between the stalls, watched the spinning lights of the rides, and ate cotton candy that stuck to our fingers. Everything felt loud, bright, and safe. After a while, my dad said he needed to go to the bathroom. The line was long, so my sister went with him. I told them I would wait near one of the food stands. There were a lot of people around and everything was well. Dad probably thought nothing could happen in just a few minutes. I thought so. The man came up to me very calmly. He didn't look strange or threatening, just an ordinary man in a jacket, like hundreds of other adults walking around the fair. He leaned down slightly and said in a quiet voice, "Jackie, your dad wants you to come over there." Then he pointed toward the parking lot. Without thinking much about it, I started walking. At 7 years old, you trust adults, especially when they say your parent is waiting. But after a few steps, something suddenly felt Wrong dot. A small detail that didn't fit. I stopped. I turned back. Toward him. I hadn't told him my name. The man walked up behind me and took my hand. Not roughly, but firmly enough that I understood. He expected me to keep moving. Come on, he said calmly. He's waiting. For a second, I froze. My mind tried to understand what was happening, and then fear hit me all at once. So I did the only thing a sip could think to do. I screamed loud. The kind of scream that cuts through music and conversation and makes people turn their heads. A woman working at one of the stands immediately looked over and rushed toward us. The moment she started moving, the man let go of my hand. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like he had never been there at all. By the time my dad came running back, the man was gone. Security walked around the entire fair looking for him. No one found him. For years my family talked about it as a close call. Just a strange man who tried something and got scared off. But when I got older, I realized something that made it feel much worse. He knew my name before he even spoke to me. That means he had been watching us. Maybe he heard my dad call me earlier. Maybe my sister said my name while we were talking. Or maybe he had been standing nearby for much longer than I ever noticed, long enough to learn who I was, long enough to wait for the moment when I was alone. Even now, whenever I smell roasted corn, cinnamon, and smoke in the cold October air, people around me smile and talk about how cozy fall feels. But my mind always goes back to that night. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in a crowd isn't the one who looks suspicious, it's the one who has been quietly watching the longest. Three years ago, my girlfriend and I went camping in the fall. It was a forest about 2 hours from the city. Mid-October, yellow leaves everywhere, cold air, and that quiet evening forest that always seems so peaceful. We found a small clearing through a camping app. It was listed as an official camping spot. A small stone fire ring, and 2 old wooden chairs sitting beside it. All around us was just forest. No other tents, no cars, no distant voices. Just trees, and the occasional sound of wind moving through the branches. We pitched our tent as the sun was setting and lit a fire. The air smelled of smoke and wet leaves. Somewhere deeper in the forest, an owl called out every few minutes. It was one of those evenings when everything feels perfectly calm. We heated up some canned food over the fire, drank wine from metal mugs, and sat there watching the flames move and crackle. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just stared into the fire. Around 10 o'clock, I suddenly noticed something strange. The forest around us had become very quiet. Not just quiet, too quiet. Normally, even in the middle of the woods, you hear something. Insects, wind brushing leaves together, branches creaking. But when something larger enters the area, everything else stops. The silence becomes different, heavier, and that's exactly what it felt like that night. I stopped talking and listened. At first there was nothing. Then I heard it, footsteps. The slow crunch of dry leaves somewhere beyond the edge of the clearing. 2 steps. Then a pause. A few more steps. Then silence again. It didn't sound like an animal. Animals move differently, faster, lighter, less careful. This sounded like a person walking slowly and stopping every few seconds. Like someone who wasn't sure if they should keep coming closer. I quietly said to my girlfriend, "Don't move." She immediately stopped and looked toward the darkness behind the firelight. The footsteps stopped, as if whoever had been walking had also noticed us listening. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The fire cracked softly. The darkness beyond it stayed completely still. After a moment, I forced myself to speak again, trying to sound casual. "Probably just another camper passing by," I said. But even while saying it, I didn't really believe it. We hadn't seen a single car on the dirt road leading in, and this place felt too remote for someone to just wander past at night. After about a minute, we decided it would be better to get into the tent. We quietly put out most of the fire and climbed inside. I switched off the flashlight. Our tent was made of thin nylon, and in the light of the almost full moon you could see shadows and silhouettes through the fabric. I lay there, staring at the pale wall of the tent, listening. At first there was nothing again. Then I saw it. A shadow outside. The silhouette of a man. He was sitting on one of the wooden chairs, beside the fire, leaning slightly forward, as if warming his hands over the remaining embers. I could see the outline of his head, his shoulders, the shape of his body, against the dim glow of the coals. He wasn't moving, just sitting there, watching the fire. Or maybe watching us. I have no idea how long it lasted. Maybe a minute, maybe 10, maybe longer. Time felt completely frozen. I didn't dare move. I didn't want the person by the fire to realize that I had seen him. Beside me I could feel my girlfriend lying perfectly still. She hadn't said a word. Then, slowly, the silhouette stood up. The shape stretched taller against the tent wall. For a moment, he remained there, standing next to the fire ring, and then he turned and walked away into the darkness of the forest. We heard the footsteps again. Crunch, pause, crunch, gradually, fading farther and farther away, until there was nothing. Just the same heavy silence that had filled the forest earlier. We stayed inside the tent the entire night. Neither of us slept. Every small sound made us tense again. When the first gray light of morning finally appeared, we waited another half hour before stepping outside. The fire had almost burned out. Cold ashes, and a few faint glowing coals remained. The clearing looked exactly the same as the night before, except for one thing. The two wooden chairs were still beside the fire, but one of them was lying on the ground, the same one the silhouette had been sitting on. It was about a meter away from where it had originally stood, as if someone had gotten up and accidentally knocked it over. Nothing else had been touched. No footprints we could clearly see. No bags, no trash, no signs. Anyone had been there at all. Just that chair. We packed our things, much faster than we had planned. Within half an hour, everything was in the car. By 8 in the morning, we were already driving away from the forest. To this day, I still don't know who was sitting by our fire that night. Maybe it really was another camper, maybe someone walking through the woods. But sometimes I keep thinking about one thing. If that person was just a tourist, then why was he sitting silently by our fire in complete darkness, without saying a single word to us?